Welcome to, wow, that's a little loud. Welcome to Ransomware Jail. Thanks everyone for coming. Appreciate it. I've seen some sessions really full, some kind of empty, so appreciate everyone who made time. I'm Andrew Miller. We have a disclaimer slide. And of course, this is the kind of question that we're always asking for a friend, because I'm sure none of you would ever be hit by ransomware, ever have it happen in your environment, right? Yeah, we'll talk about that as we go. We are skipping slides here, so this is getting interesting. Maybe I'll just go with this. So today we're going to be walking through 3 items quickly. We're going to be in turbo mode today because this is a 12-minute talk and a 15-minute time slot, exploring some new developments in ransomware, looking at some of the theory and why, frankly, it's not been working, and then getting into some stuff that you could practically do. My name is Andrew Miller. You can find me there online. I blog sporadically, tweet periodically, work at Rubrik. We're not really talking about Rubrik today. However, I've been on the customer side for about 7 years, kind of admin to engineer to architect, and then partner side, SE, a manager director for a while. So, the threat. I hope everyone here knows this. This is an IT conference, right? Ransomware. It's like, we're going to do a very 30 seconds of base definition. This is, your stuff's been encrypted. You got to pay money to get it back. Otherwise, no go. Going a little deeper, this is malware that typically infects endpoints. The scary part here is when we start to talk about zero-day browser vulnerabilities, because no matter how capable you are, you might click a link in an email, and if that goes into your browser and just clicking that kills you, you're in big trouble. And often, this goes and focuses on local file systems, but not just that. We've actually had stories of SQL DBAs where their backups that are connected via CIFS to their main workstation get encrypted. Really sucks if your databases and your backups get encrypted at the same time. Targeted attacks, they're plausible, but not likely. However, the previous best-known name here is CryptoLocker. Who knows the current best-known name? Anybody? Come on, shout it out. Somebody. Oh, come on. So we can't ignore this, right? I think we all heard about WannaCry. Like, you couldn't, even like people outside of IT were asking about this after all, you know? And frankly, you could, if you were taking a train, and this was actually a screen in Deutsche Bahn railway station, you can't miss this. There was even a whole thing going on where people started to Photoshop that onto like ATM screens and all kinds of other devices, like a Commodore 64. It was like, man, is this like real, or are people just having fun with it, you know? But the reality here, and in the little bit of time we have, I'm going to be super upfront. I'm here to scare you a little bit. It's far easier and nicer to be scared sitting at VMworld Mandalay Bay in a relatively comfortable seat than it is at 2 a.m. in the morning when you're getting a call from your boss and it's a, oh, the what the moment kind of thing. So the world has gotten scary. It's not slowing down, but why? So what's new? 2016, $1 billion ransomware impact. 2015, we don't have refresh numbers for 2017, but when we look at 2015, it was 24 million. So I'm working for a startup, Rubrik, right? We've grown like 3x in the 9 months that I've been here. This is even more dramatic growth. So if this whole IT career thing isn't working out for you, I might suggest looking at some alternate career options. This is a high growth area that you can look at. Now, like, in all seriousness, I'm not recommending you to do like unethical stuff. That's like up to you. However, frankly, there is a lot of opportunity here just even career-wise around cybersecurity. This is only going to keep going. There's a gentleman named Joseph Bonavolante. He was an FBI special agent. He was presenting at a conference. And then afterwards, he was doing some Q&A. And he even was caught on record, not really intentionally, but on record saying, sometimes the ransomware is so good, we just recommend people pay it. Now, there was a reporter there. He had to take it back because the FBI, that's not our official stance. But he was just being upfront about it. He was just being real with the people in the audience. You take some high-profile targets. SF Muni last year, the day after Thanksgiving, there was a sign saying, you've been hacked. They collected 0 fares that day. One school system paid a ransom. They didn't have a choice after a couple days. There was another one in Texas. They chose not to pay a $6,000 ransom. That's not a lot of money compared to like company budgets. They lost 3 days of student work and teacher work. The worst example here is actually Hollywood Presbyterian Medical Center. You can find this. They actually got hit by a ransomware variant. For 7 days, they had trouble dispatching ambulances, CT scans, EMR, emergency room stuff. After 7 days, they chose to pay a $17,000 ransom. That's not a lot for a hospital budget, but they wanted to stick by the principle. Good for them. Guess what happened 2 months later? They got hit again. So there's something of there's no good answer here. And the challenges are often not just around data accessibility, but the speed of restore. So there's even some studies out there stating that anywhere between 50 to 70% of companies are going to get hit by ransomware each year. Sometimes when I've given this presentation, a longer version, people come up and said, we've been hit multiple times in any given year, right? So you may or may not. But so why is this? If you've been in IT for a while, you're familiar with, we've got software providers, vendors, manufacturers, you've got customers, you've got channel partners and resellers, right? That whole dynamic. We're actually seeing that whole value chain in a kind of twisted way happening in the ransomware market. There are literally companies writing ransomware as a service kits. You can go buy, you go and give them either a percentage of your take, or you pay a certain upfront fee. There's even ones that are more or less difficult technically, like your own technical skills, or have different encryption levels, that kind of thing. And there's even advances in customer service. Well, that sounds crazy, right? But there was a great study by F-Secure. They went and got infected by 5 ransomware variants on VMs, didn't go through and pay, but they actually went through and found what the experience was like. Because you think about it, once your data gets encrypted by ransomware, you are a customer, a very unhappy, unwilling customer, but you're still a customer. So they have to help you with largely things like Bitcoin. And that is the most recent development that we've seen. And this has changed the landscape because this has now provided a relatively reliable, anonymous payment method. We've had viruses and worms with us for a long time, but this has been the difference to actually help people monetize that, right? That sounds crazy to say, but actually monetize some of the same stuff going on. And this is not, by the way, I'm not knocking Bitcoin or fiat money or any of that stuff. I don't want to go down the whole economics path, but this has made a big difference. So what I find fascinating from an IT perspective is that this is a business that competes with you. It competes with us, right? So you think about the complexity of the not modern stack. How many of you know that everything in your data center is absolutely up to date and fully patched? Like, it's not possible, right? How many of you know that none of your users will click a link that doesn't lead to a zero-day browser vulnerability? So we're used to competition from software as a service, from, say, shadow IT, even from, solution vendors put stuff together. That's even some of what I did, or even I purchased as a customer. We're not used to competition that competes with the core inefficiency of IT, and that's hard to change, right? We're not going to be able to get past that. So what are some of the classic recommendations? I like to think of this, we're now into security. So we're in defense in depth, and you need layers. Every layer has operational overhead. Too many layers, it all falls down, right? So I like to think of it as there's before the fact, human focus. That's education, companies like Know Before. This is talking to your user base, your customers internally. There's before the fact technology. So this is good stuff like Palo Alto or Kaspersky or Symantec or whoever you will. There's even before the fact financial, which is fascinating. And when you think of that, you can actually get insurance policies for ransomware. Now, those may have a lot of terms and conditions like any insurance policy, and most of them actually say that if you aren't up to date with your patches at the time of the attack, the insurance policy doesn't apply. So like, read the fine print if you see that or you're thinking about that. Then the last one, of course, is none of these are impermeable layers, or else we wouldn't be hearing all this stuff in the news, right? So we almost always end up periodically falling down to data protection and backup. So this is now into the theory. Does anyone here not have backups, or at least know you shouldn't have backups? Like, don't admit that, even if you want to raise your hand. But so, I mean, FBI, HIPAA, Sophos, drive it home a little bit more with HIPAA even, conducting frequent backups, recovering from, that's a must for ransomware. I mean, we know this stuff, so this is easy, right? We all have backups. So what's going on here? If we dig into this a little more, look at traditional data protection architectures, the design centers were 5, 10, 20 years ago. Open systems or virtualization. So there haven't been a lot of advances, and where there have been advances, because there have been some, they've been focused on adding disk-based deduplication. I did NetApp R200 behind Tivoli Storage Manager. I've done stuff with Data Domain over the years, but these have not been focused on simplifying, adding more capabilities, more features, but not simplifying day-to-day operations. So any given day, results may vary a little bit. There could be a failed backup job any given day, or even more of them that you've got to deal with. And the reason for this is, it starts easy enough. Even with some more complex architecture, you start with the backup proxy and server, you grow that out, you need to split out the database, the search side, you've got to think about single points of failure and scaling, and eventually you get to the point where, as you're dealing with master server stuff and databases, you've actually got where you've built this architecture that is almost more complex than the now more simplified version up above due to virtualization and hyperconverged architectures, right? There's been a lot of simplification up here, but it hasn't come down here. So this has led to scenarios like this. There's even a story that I like to tell from my boss, Chris Wall. He was newly in a job for a couple months, and they're sitting around like, how are we going to restore from a disaster, major disaster? And the table really goes quiet, and the one guy's like, well, what we basically do is we keep all our resumes up to date. And everyone just kind of laughs, and it's like, well, he's new in the role, and he's like, I'm not cool with that answer, but I'm not saying anything because I'm the new guy, So there's also the concept here of risk and vulnerability, and I'm especially going to go into turbo mode now. But if you look at business impact analysis, that's mapping data protection to recovery tiers. You have the idea of likelihood, threat, vulnerability, and impact. Package that together, it's risk. How do you protect best against a low probability? Because even if it's frequent, ransomware might only be once a year. Not every day you've got to maintain your backup infrastructure, but low probability, high impact. scenario. The way that you don't do it, I know, is via a very complex architecture. Because it's something that requires day-to-day care and feeding for something you only get benefits from on a every 6 month or yearly basis. That's just not going to work practically. You've got a lot of stuff to do every day. Which leads us into the hope. The main concept here is the complexity is the enemy, especially in this scenario, low probability, high impact. So whatever you can do to simplify is where you'll see benefit. And of course, this sometimes leads you into new technologies because simplifying things and getting more out of it isn't inherently easy. I get that that's actually hard from a product development standpoint. But what we've seen makes a difference are two main categories: reliability of data recovery, speed of data recovery. Reliability focuses on having simple to set up products so that you can get a lot of mileage out of them and actually use all the features and not have days or weeks or months of setup. And then simplicity of day-to-day operations, so you're not paying so much time on a day-to-day basis that you're not going to be able to keep it maintained. Immutability, the concept that no matter what happens to your primary data, that will not compromise the backups that you've taken. Some systems cannot be immutable, data backup and protection systems. Some can be configured that way. Some are that way out of the box. Something you want to make sure to look at. Next, speed. If you can't get your data back fast enough, does it actually exist? You did all this work to make sure it's reliable, but you can't get it back except for days or weeks because so much got hit. So here then gets into speed of restore, both via search, so you can find things quickly, like indexing inside VMDKs, but also live mount. So you can even go and be able to mount virtual machines out of your data protection infrastructure and then storage vMotion them back under the covers. There's products that can do that. And then, not just automation API in the sense of scripts, but being able to call, say if you have 5 servers with files across all of them, you don't want to roll all of them back, being able to call, say, find all my .enc files, pipe that into a script, pull them all back. That's actually where APIs come in from a ransomware perspective. Now, you may be thinking, don't you work for Rubrik because I'm wearing a Rubrik t-shirt? Obviously, we think that all of these things are satisfied well by Rubrik. My goal here, it's like 12 minutes. I'm not going to give you a Rubrik pitch. I'm going to talk about ransomware and how it helps. And I appreciate the time and attention. We don't have time for Q&A. So thanks for coming.